my name's Cliff. Now, before everybody runs for the traps and disappears, one of the things that I wanted to do was try and do a Mission Impossible thing, which is in 15 minutes try and summarise one of the most difficult areas from a legal perspective as humanly possible, because I do really relish a challenge, which is everything you wanted to know about music law and media law in this context but were afraid to ask. Now, one of the things that I really want to focus on is that I've seen a few of the presentations this afternoon, and you will have seen people say again and again, music rights are expensive, they're really difficult, they're really hard. One of the things that I want to do is try and demystify all of this, because like even the most disruptive of tech, once you understand it, it becomes a lot more simple. I'm also going to be talking about what the Collecting Society do, and most importantly talk about some practical considerations. So what you're all thinking really is, who am I? I started my career about 18 years ago. I entered the record business about 15 years ago. I was in radio, and for the last 6 years I've been a partner at Lewis Silkin. And my speciality has been exploiting music in new models. And just to sort of amplify that a bit, my clients go from the world of mobile brands, FMCG brands, banks, platforms, some brands up there that you may or may not recognise. I do a lot of their work in this particular space. Also in the digital music space, dealing with some of the more disruptive platforms that you may have seen and or admired as well, and I'm a real fan of making this area come alive. So I'm going to start off with the basic really. What is copyright? And lots of people say, well, it's just the right to copy, and there's no copy anyway technologically, so I'm fine. The bad news is that whilst it's called copyright, that's not really all that it's about. It's a right of property. The person who owns the copyright not only owns the right to copy it, but supposed to do a huge number of things. Sharing it, making it available, distributing it, changing it, making it available for a lending or rental model, all of these things. A number of my tech-based clients say, it's fine, my technology doesn't involve a copy, there are no copyright issues. And unfortunately, the bad news is that unfortunately does not apply. Now the thing about copyright is that it is exactly the same as any other form of property right. You can sell it, you can lend it, you can chop it up, and that is what causes the issues that we come across on a day-by-day basis. Now, copyright doesn't just exist in music. It exists in a whole number of core elements. So it covers text, it covers drama, it covers musical compositions, art, recordings, films, and indeed software as well. A number of people say to me, well, it's absolutely outrageous that these rights exist, but I'm about to go and sell my new startup company for millions and millions of dollars. Well, what they're usually paying for is the copyright in your endeavours. So copyright is really important. It's fundamental, and in truth, what we really need to do is work out how they all stitch together. Now, what we need to understand is that in a piece of recorded music as well, that a number of copyrights exist, and that's where people fall over and over again. Now, there are two main types of music copyright. There's the copyright in the lyrics and the composition, so a particular song, and there's a copyright in the particular recording of that song. There is one original master recording of Yesterday by the Beatles, owned by EMI. There are thousands upon thousands of versions of Yesterday that exist and are out there. Those two rights exist in parallel, in synchronicity, and if you want to be able to exploit those rights, you have to exploit all of them. Okay? One of the things that people don't really know is that if you look on the back of a CD, ask your parents, there are actually two different symbols actually. There's a C in a circle which stands for copyright. That represents the copyright in the composition. And there's also a P in a circle as well. And that represents the copyright in the sound recording. Two different rights, two different owners. You will need to deal with both of them. Also as well, in relation to a piece of artwork, there's a copyright in the artwork. There can be copyright in the font. There can be copyright in the photograph embodied in an artwork. So all of a sudden, when you're coming up with these extraordinary new music platforms, exploiting all of these rights at the same time, all of those rights need to be cleared on a line-by-line, granular basis. And if it sounds difficult, it is difficult. The difference is, it's just not impossible. Now, another thing is that whilst you've got these different copyrights that exist at the same time, they actually have different lengths. So in relation to lyrics, it's 70 years from the death of the writer. So if anyone's ever seen the film About a Boy, and the guy doesn't have to work anymore because his dad wrote a one-hit wonder, that's because for 70 years since the death of the author, copyright exists in that particular song. If it's a jointly created work, so something like the works of Lennon and McCartney, those songs, those rights don't expire until 70 years after McCartney, unfortunately, departs. So you can get an idea about the value of these rights is quite significant and quite enormous. Now at the moment, the copyright for sound recordings lasts 50 years, effectively what was a lifetime or working lifetime. Now there's a proposal that that's going to be extended to 70 years, which means for those who are clearing music going forward, they're going to have to bear that in mind, that there is a moving goalpost. I've got this personal theory that whenever the Beatles are about to come out for copyright may get extended, so there's something you need to keep an eye on. So, you've heard people talking about music rights being expensive, you've heard them about being difficult, you've heard them about being painful. One of the ways that I've tried to say to people is actually, back to anyone who's a fan of Shrek saying that ogres are like onions, well actually music rights are like onions, because you've got all of these rights at exactly the same time. Now, some of my clients, of whatever sophistry, ask me the question, why? Why is it so difficult? One way that might make it easier to understand is that a new right was created with every new form of technology. So the first rights that came along was for the live performance of music, so theatres. So performing rights were enshrined. People pay for it, the creators should be rewarded. Then there was this business when people would actually transcribe the notes, put them on annotated paper and sell that sheet music. So music publishing rights came into play. Then you had mass printing presses. About 110 years ago, a dangerous new technology came along, which meant that vast numbers of these things could be created in a second. So a new right was created, and that was mechanical copyright. That dangerous new technology was actually the printing press. Then you had the arrival of sound recordings. Sound recordings, in relation to the music context, not even 100 years old as a business model. So the sound recording right came along. Then you had the broadcasting, so then you had public performance rights, and then you had narrowcasting and digital distribution. So this making available right was enshrined. Now, the problem is that with your level of sophistry in the world of music tech, it means that all of those layers are usually being used by your services at any particular time. So people say to me, well, I've gone and spoken to the record label, or I've gone and spoken to the publishers, or I've spoken to the guys at PRS, or I've gone and spoken to the guys at Merlin, everything's fine. Unfortunately, you've probably dealt with one of those lines, if you're lucky, but often not. So keeping the idea of all of these lines of clearances whilst you're dealing with those lines of code, really, really important. Now, another thing that I hear is, look, it's fine, I've gone and spoken to the band's management, they've said they can use their music on our app, it's absolutely fine. Now, I'm not saying that all of your mates are liars, but actually often that's not the case. Whilst you may have spoken to the manager, artists normally assign their copyright in return for funding. So in the same way that you might go to a VC and give them rights over your code or your IP or your equity structure, artists give their rights in their sound recordings, usually to labels, and they give their rights in relation to their songs to music publishers. And they're usually owned, or at least controlled, by those entities. So artist manager may be absolutely fine, but unless you've gone to the people who own those rights, you are going to be in trouble. Also, what you need to understand is that record companies normally keep the rights forever, and music publishing companies normally keep them for an amount of time in a particular territory or in a particular way, and those rights go back. So, as if any of this wasn't complex enough, the short answer is that often the people you're dealing with may not be all of the people you need to deal with at the same time. So a record label, and we've talked about labels, and Tim had talked about the difference between the various types of labels as well, are really, really important. But a record company is a business that deals in sound recordings. They're the people who own the P inner circle right. The label is a unit within a label that will deal with a particular genre, or a particular artist, or a particular A&R guy. And a single record company can run many, many labels, and those terms are used interchangeably. The thing is though, you often may find that you are speaking to a label within a group that said, yeah, you can use our rights, it's fine, where actually the overarching record company may say no. So again, it's really, really important whenever you're dealing with music rights that you are dealing with the right people. Now, music publishing is nothing to do with books. It's more to do with publishing, their history, their origin was in the world of sheet music. Taking a piece of music, annotating it, and selling it to the public by way of a physical copy. When mass printing came along and the business model changed, they ostensibly moved their businesses to a licensing model. Instead of selling bits of paper, they sell rights. They only exist to sell and monetize these rights. And because no matter what you're doing, you're always going to have to deal with them, they are the people you should often be talking to first. Sadly, in virtually every case I come across, they are the people who are dealt with last, which is a really, really bad idea. So music publishers are your friends, and music publishers should be spoken to early. Because often, if you can't get the rights to the original sound recording, you may be able to get to the rights to the song and record your own version and make it available for your app, for your platform, and for your site. Okay? Now again, the main role of these music publishers is to collect money from the usages around the world. And also they will place songs on albums and do deals with artists to say, please record this particular song because we'll get a share of the revenue. Now, if things aren't even complex enough for you as well, an artist will normally say, a songwriter will normally say, the performance rights of my songs, it's too difficult to deal with all of the people who are using music, I'll go to PRS for Music. They will collect on the back of the use of my songs. Any of you who've ever written a song, any of you that's ever written a song that's gone on radio, any of you that's writing music for your own platforms or apps, join up as a member of PRS for Music. There may be money there waiting for you to be distributed to you. So if you're a songwriter, PRS for Music is a really, really good idea. The performance rights for sound recordings, the record labels have assigned to a body called PPL who will collect that money for them. And because of changes in the law, that money used to always go to the record companies, but now it's split 50-50 between the owners of the sound recording and the people performing on it. You may or may not have heard rumours of various A&R men, always being listed as performers on records, etc., that they may or may not have done so. It's because they'll get PPL revenues. Simple as that. There's also another body out there called the MCPS, who act as the agent to collect monies from the copies of sound recordings. To make things slightly easier, MCPS and PRS join together and have called themselves PRS for Music, but they administer both of those rights. So again, in summary, PRS, if there's music performed out there in any way, they will collect it in relation for the songwriting, for the writers and the publishers, and PPL, it's for the labels and for the performers. Right. I've now got you fully hooked, I can tell. But the issue, what I'm going to say now, is the really, really, really important stuff. What we have found throughout history, with the discovery of radio, with the discovering the printing press, with the discovery of the internet, is that licensing structures have usually taken a generation to catch up with the usage and the technology. For you guys, as you will have found as well, that many of the people who are presenting you today are offering you alternatives, and this is a lot of the reason why. It's really tough. It's really, really tough. But unlike various other forms of exploitation, the issue with digital music rights is that you are usually dealing with all of the rights at the same time. A cached copy, a making available, a dissemination. It may be a remix app by way of an adaptation. There are many of my clients who are using all of the rights at the same time, and every single one needs to be clear. Also, in the old world, many of these rights were granted on a territory-by-territory basis. I don't need to tell anyone in this room that that does not match how people consume or deliver or transfer music in this digital age. It's one of the issues that we've got with regard to music rights licenses. They're not really fit for the purpose at the moment. So these licensing schemes are still progressing. I have to say that the UK is amongst the most progressive, but anyone who's trying to launch a pan-European service, and I'm sure that many of the people in this room bear the scars of it as well, say it's really, really difficult. It's not impossible, it's just difficult. Now, there are a bunch of licensing frameworks and structured, as Tim was saying earlier. You've got streaming, you've got cash downloads, you've got tethered downloads, you've got premium, you've got free-to-air, you've got freemium, subscription, etc. There are a panoply of business models. The difficulty is that given the fact that you need to deal with probably about 70 different rights holders if you want to launch a pan-European service, it also requires all 70 of them to accept your business model. Okay, it's very, very difficult to do. So one of the things you want to do is get the right people on your side as quickly as possible. I'm going to say this once, a really good lawyer is a really, really good idea. But two, what you really need to be doing is engaging with people. I used to work for a record label for many, many years. Walking into the room saying, you're all screwed, I'm going to save your business, give me all your rights for free, doesn't tend to work. I have personally observed it probably at least 10 times, however. So all I'm saying is engagement, partnership, and a way of saying, we have got a fantastic way to monetize your rights and make you look great. We can give you access to data, insight, location data, demographication, or working with brands in a way that's never worked before. And what we're going to do is share the upside with you. It very rarely happens, and I think that the people who are looking to use music, who approach it in that spirit, are the ones that tend to get there. So, in summary, I'm just going to talk through a few myths that I have to say that even my most sophisticated my clients have walked into the room. I'm just going to do a quick true or false, and you can just pipe up. Right, okay, so myth number one. All music needs to be licensed no matter how small or how little. True or false? False. Who said false? Why is that? Right, big myth number one. Unfortunately, it's false. Well, it's true that you have to clear it all. It's false that you've got a de minimis limit. Unfortunately, things like the 30-second rule or the 1-minute rule, unfortunately, is what we as lawyers call pub law. It's what people say to each other in the pub. It's simply not true. If you are using music that's owned by a third party, that's a substantial part, and the substantial part is a qualitative test, not a quantitative test, it needs to be cleared. And the chances are that you are going to be using a substantial part of someone's copyright or intellectual property right. Probably the most common preconception when it comes to this one. Myth number two is that, look, I can just get a one-stop shop license for global. It's fine, I'm making it available from the UK, I can get one license and that's fine. Well, we know already that that's false. You're going to have to close a number of deals, and if your deal is going to be breaking new ground, you're probably going to have to license a few more. Next one is whether or not you need a license for every territory where it's made available and promoted, rather than wherever my servers are hosted. And unfortunately, it's true. Every single territory needs to be cleared on a case-by-case basis. Next myth is, well, I've cleared the publishing rights, I've got a license from PRS to go globally or pan-European, I don't need to get any other rights. Well, unfortunately, totally false. And also, the most important point, which we know is true, is that content is owned by multiple owners, always at the same time. Okay? And then going through it as well, once you've got your rights, you can make it available wherever you want on any URL. I'm afraid it's false. Artists have got the rights to all their materials. I've spoken to the manager, it's absolutely fine. Well, you know the answer to that one already, that's false. And also this territorial issue, that basically as long as you've got the server cleared, or we've got it in relation to active promotion, we're covered, that's fine. And unfortunately, it's not. So in summary, if you're going to take anything away from today, these are the points I want you to understand. If you are having a service offering music, and that's kind of the point of today, please, please, please don't let music or rights be your last consideration. They should be your first. I have dealt with people who get server rack space, who get trademarks, who get chairs, who get Macs, who get every form of thing under the sun, and then act surprised when they have to go and get music clearances, okay? If it's kind of what your business is about, your entire business is dependent on it. Number two, make sure you identify who you've got to speak to up front and engage with them early. The later you leave it, guess what? Does your negotiating position go up or down? And if your business is just about to launch and you think, I'll put in a quick call to rights holder on a Friday because I'm going to launch globally on Monday, bad idea. Really, really bad idea. Now, number three, this is a difficult one, and it may sound a bit hippie-ish, but being open, honest, and upfront with licensors, the people with the rights, is probably the right way to go. Saying you're going to have a zillion consumers in year one is probably going to be a very expensive mistake. Over-promising, under-delivering, very, very costly. We didn't say that we were going to launch abroad. We didn't say that we were funded by a brand. We didn't say. All are the ways to make it much more sticky and expensive. And lastly, please, 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 no more acting surprised that rights are going to cost you money or time, or that you might have to speak to a lawyer or an accountant or any of those things. If those aren't part of your business plan, you will have no business. Most importantly, any investor who wants to come into your business, if you haven't been thinking about these things, will literally run a mile away from your business plan. It looks responsible, it looks grown up, and it looks like a business. So do make sure you've got one. If anyone's got any questions, I'm going to be milling around for the next couple of hours or so, but apart from that, thank you for staying awake. I'm Cliff. Have a good afternoon.
Cliff, thanks very much. Free legal advice, can't be bad. Doesn't come around often.